Hey there, welcome to my channel. Today we're gonna be answering a question that's been asked by many, probably not you, but someone else. How did English become the global language? Well, to answer that question, we have to go back in time to when England was ruled over by a very grumpy-looking dude wearing way too much fur. This guy, whose name was King Henry VIII, had a hobby of breaking away from the Catholic Church every time he wanted to get something that the Pope wouldn't allow him to have. In this case, getting divorced and then immediately marrying one of his mistresses. He did this so often that after he died, his advisors decided to just cut the middleman out of the equation and declared England a Protestant country in 1534. This act of religious treason didn't sit well with the rest of Europe, who promptly banned English citizens from participating in trade. For the next 80 years, England would be economically miserable, save for the fact that they had stumbled upon gold in Ireland. The sweet irony of the situation, they were able to become rich by exploiting the resources of another country while their own people were trying to scrape by. Kind of makes you think. Anyway, this ended in 1603 when King James VI of Scotland came over and took the throne. His crown, however, would be a rather uncomfortable one. The English, Scottish, and Irish people all hated each other's guts and spent most of the next century killing each other in waves of civil war and religious persecution. So naturally, in order to restore order to the kingdom, Oliver Cromwell decided to start a second civil war, which he won. And then he immediately died, at which point the monarchy was restored and England became the Commonwealth of England. But then King Charles II got into a massive disagreement with Parliament about how absolute his power should be, and that ended with his head on a silver platter. After that, they tried having a republic thing for a bit, but that ended up being boring, so they brought back the monarchy and put William and Mary on the throne. Now, these two weren't very interested in ruling over their newfound empire, so they farmed out the responsibility to a parliament-appointed cabinet, which led to the creation of the prime minister position. Then England went and did what they always do, which is fight a bunch of wars against everyone in Europe and occasionally set fire to London. It wasn't until 1707 that things began to settle down when the English and Scottish parliaments merged, creating a single parliament for the entire British Empire. This union is what led to the Great Vowel Shift, which was basically an evolution of the English language where the pronunciation of vowels changed significantly, which contributed to the modern sounds of English. And if you've ever wondered why some people still say things like "Goddamn the bloody Duke of York," it's because of this period of time when England was attempting to murder anyone with a French accent. Anyway, during this period of relative peace and quiet, the British Empire began its conquest of North America. When the United States was founded, English was already the dominant language of the region. However, Americans began to develop their own distinct accent and grammar rules, which some British people today consider to be incorrect. But hey, it's all part of evolving, right? But anyway, as the United States grew in size and influence, so did its version of English, which eventually became known as American English. While Americans were busy moving west and fighting a bunch of wars, the British were busy building ships that could carry lots of people across the ocean. As more and more immigrants arrived in the United States, English would become the lingua franca or common language that they all used to communicate with each other. This, along with the US's growing prominence on the world stage, helped propel English to international prominence. So to recap, English became popular in America because it was brought over by colonists who evolved the language and then killed everyone who spoke French. And then the US exported its version of English around the world by helping fund the European revolutions. And then they kept doing that thing they do where they build massive empires only to lose interest and hand it off to someone else. Anyway, in the early 1800s, English became the language of science. Why? Well, it turns out that a lot of scientific discoveries were being made in Britain at the time, and most of those scientists just so happened to be British. As the scientific method evolved and improved, it became standardized in the English language. This is one of the main reasons why learning English is still a requirement for most scientists today. It's just easier that way. A similar thing also happened in aviation. The Wright brothers were the first to invent powered flight, and the International Civil Aviation Organization is based in Canada, which means that everything had to be written in English. Therefore, aviation terminology is almost entirely based around English words. This is also true of diplomacy as well. Most countries maintain their embassies in London and Washington, D.C., and the United Nations is based in New York City. All of this meant that English became the common language of diplomats and politicians. And if you've ever been confused by something called the Geneva Convention, just know that it could have just as easily been called the Paris Accords or the Vienna Protocols. It just so happens that the first meeting was held in Geneva and they needed a common language. The US played a large role in spreading English around the world in the late 1900s through two primary avenues. The first is radio broadcasts funded by the federal government that were intended to teach English to non-native speakers. The second was Hollywood. As movies became more popular around the world, American films gave viewers a window into the lives of Americans and taught them English at the same time. Some experts believe that this was one of the main factors in the rapid spread of American English around the world. One of the major advantages of living in the 21st century is the ability to communicate with pretty much anyone anywhere in the world. And a big part of that has been the explosion of the internet, which was largely created by Americans. In addition, Wikipedia has been translated into 311 languages, but most of the articles are still written in English because most of the people editing them happen to speak English. A similar argument can be made for the popularity of YouTube, which also started in the United States. Most videos are uploaded in English, meaning that it's often easier for people to learn English by watching videos on it than it is to find videos in their native language. And although the internet and social media have been great tools for learning English, it's also led to a surge in the use of slang and abbreviated speech patterns, such as texting language. Some purists argue that this kind of speech is slowly destroying the English language, but most experts disagree. They argue that language will always evolve to be more efficient, and that's just how language works. They also pointed out that every generation says the language is dying and they're wrong. Like, look at me saying that the language is dying. I'm part of the problem. So who knows, maybe 50 years from now people will be speaking something called textish. And in the future, English will either continue to remain as the world's lingua franca or it will lose its dominance. There are a number of reasons why this might happen. The EU has discussed adopting a common language and several countries have begun to restrict the use of English in public. Places like Singapore, however, see this as a threat to their status on the world stage and have actively encouraged their citizens to learn English. It will likely retain its status as the most commonly learned second language simply because there are more native speakers than any other language and because it's useful for international relations. But who knows, maybe in 100 years, someone will look back at this video and laugh at how stupid we were for thinking that English would remain relevant. Or maybe that'll be the comment section. Alright, thanks for watching.